Yo, what's good everybody? Welcome to the non-docu series number 13. Today I'm going to keep the intro short because we have a hefty conversation to talk about today, which is switching positions. And for me, switching positions can mean a lot of different things because, as you all know, I work at Quick Trip. You can move up pretty quickly if you want to. I play sports and I go to church. This is about none of the above. It's about something that we all go through, that we are probably dealing with or have dealt with at some point in our lives. And it is talking about going through the process. Where do we stand? Who am I in this process? That's what I'm talking about today. So I was actually studying this, and the idea came to me yesterday while I was and yesterday meaning Thursday, because I'm recording this a day early, because tomorrow being Saturday, I gotta work in the midday, so I won't have time to record. So I was hanging out with my friend yesterday, and we were just talking about what we thought, and we were talking about God, we were talking about society today, talking about how we act and how we treat each other in this day and age. And I began to think about the timeline of our success, the timeline of our growth, the timeline of our development, because there's been a number of situations where I've had to look back and remember that it's a process and good things take time, and not everybody grows the same way, not everybody develops at the same pace, and no matter what, we have to understand that slowly but surely is probably the best route. And the focus of today's study, because I studied this today in my Bible and earlier this morning, the focus is, in a world where everything is available, life seems like it's in a hurry to spit us out, and we're following its orders. So we need to adjust. And I had a question, which was, can we really live a fulfilled life like this? Being rushed, feeling as if we have to be this now, have to be this in this instant, have to be great right now, have to be who God wants us to be in this immediate moment, especially us younger people, younger Christians, younger dreamers. We feel as if we have to have it now because everything is in our immediacy. It's in our possession right now. It's in our fingertips. It's in our hands. We can see it. Our desires, our hopes, our dreams. They're right there. But we forget that it takes time. One of the people in the Bible that is actually a really good example of this is Joseph. And if you don't know who Joseph is, you can find his story in Genesis in the late 30s in the chapters. So if you want to read his story, you can read it. But I'm going to do a little quick recap of his story. And it said, this is a man who was exposed to the vision in which his life would behold at a young age. See, a lot of us that watch these videos, a lot of us that actually are in a hurry, in a rush, are young. I'm 19. I know a bunch of people who are around my age and a little bit older, maybe 22, 23 at the oldest. And there's some older. But those of us who are chasing a dream are often younger because we still have that hope and desire to be different, to stand out. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's necessary in today's world where everything seems to be replicated by the next person. If we can't be different, I don't think we can really change the world. So it's not a bad thing to dream. So, like I said, he was exposed to the vision, to the dream in which his life would behold at a young age. Now, he was an upstanding child of Israel, whose initial name was Jacob and Esau. And he had a heart for God. And in the immediacy of having a dream, Joseph went out and found his brothers, 11 of which were not as favored as he was in the eyes of their father. And that was evident through the clothing which he wore. He wore a coat of many colors, made specifically for him by Israel. And now the dream, specifically, was that Joseph would stand above his brothers, and they would be bowing down before him as he stood above them. Now we'll get into this in a second. And this is what led to his downfall. The presentation of the dream is what led to his downfall. See, his brothers initially intended to kill him, but then they decided that's too extreme, so they put him into a pit. And then they had the bright idea to say, you know what? Slavery is a better option. That way he's out of our sight, out of sight. Don't worry about it. You don't need to worry about him anymore. If he survives, he survives. If he dies, he dies. Because they hated him. Because they weren't as loved as he was. And do I have anything against him for that? No. Because some people are like that. And sometimes that situation does occur in people's lives and they do actually feel that discontent towards their siblings. But it's just understanding that they're your siblings. You gotta love them anyway. I'm sorry. You gotta love them anyway. But they did it in that season, okay? So they sent him off into slavery. Alright. And then he ended up serving in the house of his slave master. Where initially he was betrayed by his brothers, then he was betrayed by his slave master's wife. She lied on him, said he raped her. Alright, now he's in prison. Now slavery and prison. What do those two things do to you? Most of them demoralize you. They take away your humanity to make you feel like you don't matter. They make you feel as if you aren't human anymore. As if you're just a statistic now. But for Joseph in this story, because the Lord was with him, he prospered wherever he went. But these instances and moments were to humble him, okay? Because at a young age, he went to his brothers and expressed boldly, probably, not saying did or didn't, but he probably went there boldly saying, you guys are going to bow down to me one day. And that is a little bit of pride. If a humble man had a dream such as that, he would keep it to himself to start and let his actions show later on in the future. And as life permits, he will become that person in which God designed him to be. But knowing Joseph's story, we know that everything that's happened is with intention and purpose. He needed to be humbled, and this is how he was humbled. And you can find it all in Genesis, like I said. Now, as the story goes along, it's funny how I started with the dream, and the actual introduction to his purpose also started with the dream. But it started with interpreting the dream instead of expressing the dream. So then he ended up secondhand to Pharaoh, where eventually his brothers did bow down to him, and he was, instead of bitter, he was of service and love to them. Now Joseph's process was a lot crazier than any of ours will ever be. I bet you in that moment when his brothers bowed down in front of him, he remembered and said in his head, they helped me, and I still love them. Because without that moment of humbling, without those moments of humbling, I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't be second to Pharaoh if the Lord didn't put me through this. I needed to be humbled. I needed this process, this 30-some-odd year process to become who I am today. And here we are sitting thinking that we had to happen in 20 minutes. In a year, in a month, in 2 months, in a summer, in a winter. We need it now. That's what we think. But there are two specific things and phrases in the story I wanted to highlight. Like I already mentioned, Genesis 39 and 2, where the Lord was with Joseph, he was a prosperous man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian, being the Potiphar. But Genesis 41 and 16 I really like, because this is when Pharaoh asks and requests of Joseph to interpret his dream. And the way and manner in which Pharaoh asked him was insinuating that Joseph was the one with the power to interpret that dream. But Joseph's answer to Pharaoh was, it is not me, it's not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Not without God. That's what Joseph was saying. This is not possible without God. And for me personally, this is true. Dream publications would not exist without God. And for a lot of us Christians, where we are today would not be possible without God. We can do all the natural work, but what's going on the inside is much more important. If we don't see that, then we will miss the fact that it's not in us, but God. We don't have that kind of power without Him. So switching positions. What makes Joseph and his story such a perfect example of this? Well, we have a dream, and we have access to the platform and the resources necessary to pursue it. But we get so excited having one that we try to rush straight to the point of ascension. Like Joseph running to his brothers. He thought that if I tell them, they'll just automatically believe me and be like, oh, okay, we'll bow down before you and we'll help you get there. No, and that didn't happen. And because of his hastiness, he was betrayed. And betrayal is not fun. But how often is it that our reality here, especially as Christians, trying to find and pursue our purpose and calling in God, yeah, how often is it that we're trying to find our purpose or calling in God? And why are we in such a rush? Like, I know we're living in the end times. I understand that. I know you understand that, but we also have to understand that God's timing is perfect. His timing is perfect. Like, Joseph wouldn't be where he was if he didn't endure that time-inducing and time-consuming journey, 30-something years, before he became what God designed him to be. And you know where he was? In the worst places possible. Slavery and prison. And here we are on Instagram thinking, oh, we don't get a like. I'm suffering the most. If you get a rude comment, I'm suffering the most. Those things happen. And sometimes our response is a result of our own pride. Like, especially as leaders, it's important to know that we are not everything. It's not about us. It's not. Our name means little in comparison to God's. In your ministry, especially ministry, we have to understand that our name isn't what we're trying to stress, isn't what we're trying to promote. We're trying to promote the goodness and kindness and love of Jesus, the salvation He offers, the glory and majesty in which He possesses, the amount of love that He showed dying on the cross for us. That's what our ministry is for. Teaching each other how to receive the Holy Ghost, how to obtain true salvation and love and connection with God. It's not about having my name remembered as such and such preacher, having this trademark, this tagline. That's not what it's about. It's about connecting. It's not even always about shouting and doing all the extra. It's about teaching. And the Bible talks about edifying one another. And edification is teaching, helping each other understand and get a better grasp as to what it is that we believe. That's what our job as ministers and leaders in the walk with Christ, as Christians, is about. And for Joseph, after the encounter through hardship, even if the Lord prospered him, he had to endure for a season beforehand. And this is a humbling process. Because think about it. Why would a young man such as he go exclaim his dream to those who were to be below him if he hadn't a big head in that moment? He needed to be humbled. And as a result, his brothers tossed him right into God's plan. Isn't that crazy? I can't say it didn't hurt him, but the Lord was with him. Meaning that this was gonna happen. Like, it was meant to happen. But he might not have understood that, but he did at the same time. So, it's crazy how his brothers didn't know what they were doing. They had an intent, but that intent kind of backfired on them. But it worked in all of their favor in the end. Joseph was a slave, prisoner, and abandoned brother. So who are you? Well, you're someone in the middle of a process. Switch your position from the head to the tail, because God led Joseph to where he needed to be. And Joseph allowed God to do so by giving him free reign on how he used him. So how can we expect God to use us if we treat him like a sidekick? Alright. See, we aren't fulfilling our God-given purpose that way. Instead, we're filling our self-desire. This is what I was talking about, trying to get our names remembered, things like that. Because we don't understand that this is a process. And everything is, no matter where you are or what you believe in life, is a process. And you can't avoid it with clickbait, because eventually real life hits. And if you haven't been nurtured and adapted to what it is life is, you'll crumble. Because God is the ultimate foundation. But you have to choose. Will you root yourself in the name that you somehow developed for yourself, or in the name that God intended to give you, and the purpose that God intended to give you, and the reason that God intended to give you? A lot of us struggle with identity because we're looking in the wrong places. We're trying to have people tell us, when ultimately the one who knows us the best is our Creator. Ultimately, the one who cares about us the most is our Creator. And then we look in the mirror and we try so hard to create a false image of who we are. We try to imitate other people because we think where they are is where we want to be, where we need to be in order to be successful and worthy of being called God's children. Submission is probably the most important thing when it comes to following and finding God for yourself, is submission. Submitting to the words in which He wrote and written for us. That's the right word. But it's important that we give Him the time and space of day to truly deal and talk to us. And because a lot of us are prideful, we think that the Lord is talking to us when it's just us talking to ourselves, tricking ourselves, thinking that this is where we need to be, this is how we need to be in order to be where God wants us to be. And we get in the way trying to create a position for ourselves where God doesn't intend for us to be. When ultimately, if we just let Him, He will place us where we need to be. And one thing about Joseph I admire the most is that he was of service to his family and the people alike, even in his greatest position. Like, he didn't try to rule, but he worked to serve and prepare. And he basically said to Pharaoh, "It's not me, but it's God that is able." Because he realized it's not about him. And it's more than just me too. Like with Dream Publications, if you think I'm doing it just for money, no. The reason I've been pushing freedom so much is because I know there's a message in there for somebody that needs it. A story in there that I know somebody can connect with. And in this world, there aren't a lot of people that can relate to each other in this walk with Christ, because everybody's so busy trying to push this, that, and the third, when truthfully, some people just need somebody to connect and understand them. And learning that God helps us understand ourselves and seeing that portrayed through a story can help. And for those of us who are leaders, I decided to look at Matthew chapter 23, verses 11 through 12. "But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant. And whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased," which means degraded. "And he that shall humble himself shall be exalted," which is uplifted. We gotta understand that it's a process. Just got a call. Whoops. It's a process. And this is what this whole study is about. It's about understanding that we need to be patient and take all that we can from God, allowing Him to go through and do. And we have to live, and we can live a fulfilling life, knowing that the process was worth it, rather than believing that waiting is just a liability, enduring is a liability, finding yourself to submit to the love of God is a liability. And ultimately, these things are the most crucial assets to moving in purpose and calling. So we need humility, patience, and even trust in order to switch our positions. Understanding that we are not the head. Understanding that if we're in control, we might lose sight of who actually has a bigger, better plan for us. It's not about me. It's not for me. For those leaders out there, I want you to understand that this life, you aren't meant to rule. You're meant to serve. Just like Joseph. You're gonna go through. You're gonna have to fight. You're gonna have to defend your name. And sometimes you might fall because you're right. So, chase the dream, but remember who's ahead. Don't try to put yourself above God. Don't try to put yourself in His shoes when He gave you yours to walk in. Believe in yourself, because you can do it, and you will do it. You'll succeed, and you'll be great. Great enough to serve somebody else. Just gotta be patient. Let the process guide you, and let God be there with you all the way. Switch your position. Peace. Let me ask you something. If we all had a story, would you share it? Would you share your past, your present, your pain and hardship, your new pain and hardship? Maybe. But join us as we share our story, our walk with Christ, with you, in freedom. This is the meaning of life. Get yours now at www.dreamsfo1.com. Peace.